computer just told me it is 7 o'clock, so we're going to get started. And I want to welcome everyone to the candidate forum for the 2020 election of members of the Somerset Town Council. My name is Nancy SORENG, and I'm pleased to have been invited to be your moderator for this evening. I also want to thank all of you for showing your interest in the town and this election by logging on to tonight's forum. A link to the recording of this event will be available on the town website by the end of the day on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. I want to let you also know that the camera and audio is only alive for the participants, the timekeeper, and the moderator, but that should not interfere with your being able to watch and listen to this forum. This year, we have 3 candidates who are running for 2 council seats. Those candidates are Robin Barr, Morris Panner, and Steve Surko. Each of these candidates will give an opening statement of no more than 2 minutes. The order of these statements was determined by a random drawing earlier this evening. Following that, they will be asked questions that were submitted to the election committee by Somerset residents. All candidates will have the opportunity to answer each question. I will alternate the order in which candidates will respond to the questions, and they will each have 1.5 minutes to give their response, and Matt will be the timekeeper for that. Montgomery Municipal Cable is the host for this Zoom meeting and has also provided us technical support. Candidates, when your time is up, please quickly conclude your statements. Viewers are invited to submit additional questions this evening via the chat feature on Zoom. If you go to the bottom of the screen and hover your cursor around there, a box that says chat should come up and you can type your questions in there. Please make sure that you are submitting a question and not making a statement. These questions must also be relevant to service on the town council and be directed to all candidates. So once we have finished with the pre-submitted questions, we'll take a short break, and then each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to the questions that were submitted this evening. Following the question and response portion, each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. So let's get started.
It's 2 minutes.
Opening statements, and the person who drew the was Robin Barr.
Thank you for joining us this evening, everybody. And I am running for council. We've had a lot of change in Somerset and around the world in the last few months. Shocking change, in fact. And that change isn't going to stop anytime soon. We are facing, probably in Somerset, a very different environment going forward now than the nice, comfortable environment we have been experiencing recently. We need council members who can handle that changed environment, who've got knowledge, experience, and the time to make the kind of tough decisions that are going to have to be made in the years going forward. A lot of that change hovers around what we're doing now, which is shelter in place. And one of the things that I've certainly noticed in town right now is the wonderful community response in town that we've all given during this pandemic, during this shelter in place situation, from the Somerset Helping Hands to Dania Fitzgerald's face mask team, the individual acts of charity and sheer kindness throughout the town seen on the listserv. It enriches us all, that does. It warms my heart too, and it's great that that's happened and it's still happening and hopefully will continue. And that's one side of it. The other side of it is, in the Great Recession, we lost 40% of our revenue for 2 years. It was a terrible time. This time around, because of work that I did with Phil Young on the Rainy Day Fund, we will not be in that kind of situation despite the major loss in revenue that's coming. The Rainy Day Fund will save us that time. It's 2 minutes, right? I've gone through 2 minutes. All right. I'll stop there then. Thank you very much.
And now Mr. Panner.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming tonight. And good evening, Nancy. Thanks for having us. Robin, Steve, Matt. My name's Morris Panner, and I really have been privileged to serve on the council for the last 2 years. My life is very much embedded in this community. I still have middle schoolers here, and we have dolphin swimmers. We hope we have a season this summer. And I count my closest friends, some of my closest friends in this community, and really love it. I think we all share a set of commitments around the environment and the budget. Hats off to Robin and Steve and the council and the budget committee. I think everyone works together very well. And I think that part of why I would like to continue to serve is I do think we're going to go through change. And that change is going to be exciting and vibrant. And we're going to see new families come to create their lives here. Around me are new families, new children. And we want to create an environment that preserves the kind of beautiful environment that drew us here originally. So I think that one of the things that I really don't have an agenda. Most of my time has been just trying to be open-minded and collaborative with other people on the council, because we have wonderful people in the neighborhood. My commitment is try to listen and try to accommodate change and welcome and continue the vibrancy that characterizes Somerset, the welcoming nature, and the ability to build families that endure and treasure our town. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our last speaker will be Mr. Surko.
Good evening. These are challenging times, but I'm glad we can come together to discuss issues in this town forum. My wife and I moved to Uppingham Street in 2005 with our 3 children. We were drawn here by Somerset's bucolic setting, convenient metro location by the Capitol Crescent Trail, and respected school system. Our children all attended Somerset Elementary School. I'm an Eagle Scout and served as an adult Cub Scout and Boy Scout leader in the area. I also served as a soccer and lacrosse coach. Over the years, we've come to appreciate the special, engaged, and caring community which is Somerset. In between coaching and scouting, I was a member of the Parks and Natural Resources Committee for several years. I was elected to the Town Council in 2018. As I served, people started to reach out to me about issues of concern to them, from small cell towers to stormwater management. And I engaged in a broader range of issues than I'd ever thought of prior to joining the council. One of the things I've learned as a council member is the importance of community engagement. I believe that our communities reflect the values and interests of Somerset, and the council should respect and support them by recognizing their critical role in local government and consider their recommendations positively. As part of my council member duties, I served as the council liaison to the Environment Committee and have tried to be especially supportive of their efforts to install LED streetlights, purchase a battery-powered leaf blower for the town, and opt into the new Montgomery County Healthy Lawns regulation. I really don't think of myself as a radical activist. Indeed, I am a retired Navy commander with 22 years of service, including 2 Western Pacific deployments. As an engineer, my approach is to identify issues early and proactively develop solutions with the council. That's why I raised issues with our building permit process. As a result, the mayor proposed an ad hoc stormwater management and protection of the tree canopy committee to gather facts, review options, evaluate impact, and make recommendations to the council. And I'm pleased to report that I've filed it as an agenda item for our next town council meeting. Fiscal prudence is essential to local government. This is especially important now. Thank you. Thank you.
So now we'll go to the questions that were submitted by the residents. And since Mr. Panner went second last time, he's going to go first this time. Okay. And this is the question. What experiences or traits and values have you developed in your work or life settings that would help you be a good member of the Somerset Town Council?
Great question. And I think one of the things that I have grown and loved here is the ability to make such an impact in the community. We've run the Somerset race in the past. I've loved serving on the council. I've loved working with neighbors. In my private life, I run a company and I do digital health. We've been very active actually in this current crisis, so we understand how to operate in difficult conditions. I'm an entrepreneur. I've built companies. I understand how to find facts in uncertain environments. And then maybe my most important role is as a husband and father. And I think one of the things that characterizes our town and distinguishes it is that people take the time to be those things and to lead at home and in the community. So there's really nothing more special than being able to build an environment where we can nurture our children and bring forth those best qualities that I think bring all of us here. So that's what I would rely on as my reference for running and my experiences.
Thank you. And I will say, if anybody needs me to repeat a question, just let me know. Otherwise, our second person is Mr. Surko.
Can I ask you to repeat it again? I just want to get it.
Sure. It's what experiences or traits and values have you developed in your work or life settings that would help you be a good member of the Somerset Town Council?
As Morris said, it's a great question. I'm currently serving as the Chief of the Office of Technology Development at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. In that role, I lead a team of about 30 scientists and other professionals. And I've learned a lot about fiscal planning, project execution, adherence to contracting, and I've tried to apply those to service on the council. One of my favorite questions when we have a new building permit is, are you asking for a waiver in this permit? And if so, I want to find out what those waivers are. And I guess the other thing I'd like to highlight is I've learned the importance of work-life balance. I try and teach that to the people on my team. I try and also teach that to my family. And I think we bring that, we all bring that to the council. We're trying to get a job done. We're trying to support the community and make the community a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Mr. Barr.
Yes, I have been given so much in life that I just feel that in return I need to give back. And I have done that through much of my life, particularly locally. I have, even from my early days, committed to service to the town. I worked on the Environment Committee for 12, 15 years. I've chaired it now for 7 years. And of course, as I mentioned, I worked on the Budget Committee and came out with the Rainy Day Fund. And I see that as active service as well, that to accomplish things for the town, for the people of the town in the service that I'm doing. So we worked I worked with Patty Friedman to establish the composting service in the town, for example. I worked with numerous members of the Environment Committee to set up the rain garden and conservation landscaping by the tennis courts. These are things that I see as giving back to the community, putting my efforts into that to give back to the community. I just want to continue that in a larger way on the council.
All right, so now we're going to go to our second question. And this time we'll start with Mr. Surko. And the question is, as a council member, how do you think we should balance defining, setting, and achieving a set of environmental goals with the reality that new development and renovations of existing properties are inevitable?
I think we need to, great question. Certainly it's very timely. It's been a topic of interest for the council. I think it's important to work from the values of the community or the priorities of Somerset. The way I interpret things, and I look at our town code, there's language there about that in essence say that we need to respect neighbors, their health, the safety, and the enjoyment of their property and their homes. So how do I think things should be balanced? I think construction is inevitable, and I support it, and I think that folks should be able to basically build whatever they want to on their property, but there are regulations in place from the county, and I think that the town should assess whether or not those current regulations are meeting our goals, especially with questions like stormwater runoff. Like since 2014, I believe every single new building permit that's come to the council has had a stormwater waiver from the county. So that means we're not managing that stormwater and it's impacting the neighbors. Thank you.
And now it's Mr. Barr's turn.
Right. It is a challenging problem, and I don't think we're managing it well at the moment, frankly. I do see steps being taken now that are going to help us in the future, and I support those steps. So one of the things that we need to be able to do is advertise our values to incoming residents. And that is being partly accomplished by the welcome letter that's been prepared by a number of residents. Julie Greenberg comes to mind as a leader in that force and is now going through council. That is saying that we consider trees important, we consider stormwater management a problem, and that has to be discussed too. Getting those values out front so that both builders and owners see those values is important, but we can do much more than that. We really can. We need to tell people about our town, about the swim team, about the pool, about the tennis club, all the committees that we have that allow for people to participate in town government. Make that out there with the welcome letter on a website so that we've got full information for the owners coming in so they understand what the town is and they then can make informed choices when they're designing their homes. And it is about informed choices. That's what I'm looking for, and that's what I hope we'll see. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next question that was submitted by a resident is, can you please...
Morris hasn't answered yet.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, Morris.
Everything froze.
No problem. In many ways, I agree with big chunks of what both Steve and Robin said. And so maybe one of the themes we're going to talk about tonight, and 90 seconds isn't a lot to do it, but stormwater management and making sure water's not running off on each other's property. They're slightly different issues, and I'm going to spend some time talking about how we address those. And then on Robin, so Steve, I agree with you. We should be allowed people to build what they can if they follow the regulations, and I've always respected your engineering approach to things. And Robin, I agree with you. We should be emphasizing our active committee and participation structure. The one area where I always get a little nervous is when we talk about values. I think we all prioritize a beautiful environment. But one thing I love about our town is I think a lot of people have a lot of different values. And I like the fact that we can enable that and be welcoming to that. And one of the things that I like about our town is that we enable people to express themselves and to feel free and open here. And my children love it, I love it, and I think that's what draws people here. So agree with big swaths of what you guys said, but have a few little differences on the edges there.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I left you off.
That's fine.
Right. So now we're going to change the order, and this time it will be Mr. Barr who goes first, but I better read the question prior to that. And that is, can you please state your views on the mayor's suggestion of the new committee on building code, stormwater management, and tree protection?
Right, yes. So I think most of us are familiar with what Jeffrey sent around an email, that this is an attempt to clarify our code on both stormwater and tree protection. And I think that is part of the effort generally to improve the process going forward in approving permits for approval. And in that context, I very much approve this effort. I don't think it's going to do the job fully, and I think we need the kind of things I was talking about in the last question as well. In other words, this is the code and we need to improve the code, but we need to improve our process beyond the code. And so what's I said about building the website that makes it a town very attractive to incoming residents, while also stating our problems of stormwater and our care for trees. And I honestly think that trees are a value in our town, Maurice. I think that is, we are a tree city and we recognize them, and that's important. Beyond that, we need to improve our process in other ways. And one of the things that when we've got money we should do is actually have a stormwater consult. After a waiver has been granted by the county, we should do our own town stormwater consult to give that information to the council to help their decision making. Thanks. That's it.
All right, and now our second person to respond will be Mr. Panner.
Perfect. So I love our tree city, and I think that's fantastic. So I think we're all in violent agreement there. But let me start a theme that I think we need to kind of address, which is that stormwater and managing runoff are two very different things. When I first saw the fact that all these waivers had been granted, I was puzzled by it and I wanted to inquire further. I spent a lot of time inquiring on it and speaking to the county as well as private engineers. And at the end of the day, and we'll talk about it a lot tonight, controlling runoff is not the same thing as stormwater management. Stormwater management is meant for a very specific goal, which is to prevent particulate from coming into the bay. It didn't even exist in a residential context until 2010. So anything built before that has no mandated stormwater management. That's different than runoff. But one of the things that I commit to is as we move forward, I want to bring experts to bear on this. So, and I applaud the Mayor's Committee and I completely support it. I want to be on it. And I want to make sure diverse voices are on it so we get the information. And both Robin and Steve are very data driven. And I applaud that approach and share it.
Thank you. Mr. Surko, it's your turn.
Thank you. I think this is perhaps another example where we're fairly well aligned on many aspects of an issue. Somerset is a tree city, and I think that's wonderful. It's one of the things that attracted us to the town when my family moved here. It's just a beautiful town. But those trees are more than just attractive. They provide cooling in the summertime. They're very positive for the environment. They're also good at water retention in case of storms, and they add value to homeowners, according to some studies. With regards to the mayor's proposal, I am completely behind the mayor's proposal. This actually stems from some discussions that I brought to the town council starting earlier this year. So I've already put it on the agenda for our June meeting, our June council meeting. I think I'd like to highlight one of the things that Morris talked about, and that is you start to dig into the complexity of the stormwater issue. And it is complex. There are a number of factors. So I'm really excited about this study to dig into the facts, understand what are issues within the town, what has perhaps changed over time in terms of regulations, what works or does not work in terms of our current regulations or approach to management. As Robin mentioned, we can improve the website and the welcoming letter. Thank you.
Thank you. So as you might guess, there were a number of questions related to this proposed committee. So I'm going to just ask one follow-up question. And that is what issues would you specifically like this proposed committee to tackle? And this time it's Mr. Panner's turn to go first.
So the most important issues to me in this committee context is I want to make sure that we're protecting our tree canopy. Tree canopy is also very complicated because one of the things we suffer from, unfortunately, is above ground power lines that make it a little harder for us to put in the canopy trees that we might in public land. So one of the things I really would like to see us look at is understand what's happened to our canopy and understand how we want to think about a reforestation plan with that. One of the things that's tricky about reforestation is that sometimes trees that are all kind of in the same cohort tend to expire at the same time. So even replanting may or may not accomplish the goal of having a vigorous canopy. So that's one. I'd love to see that dug into. And then the other is, I really would like to see the issue of runoff. I'm not talking stormwater management. That's very different. And we could talk about that, but I don't think it's going to get us where we want to go, which is what I want to make sure of, is that we don't have water pooling in our backyards or flooding our basement, and that we can do a good job building while not inconveniencing neighbors or their property. Those would be my top priorities. There's a lot of issues, but those in a nutshell, in 90 seconds, those are those.
Thank you. And now Mr. Surko.
I really agree with Morris, and I think that's the title of the ad hoc committee that the mayor proposed and I have put on the agenda, is protecting the tree canopy and the stormwater management. But stormwater management is really a catchphrase for the broader issue that Morris is getting at, which is the runoff affecting neighbors. The stormwater is very important for environmental reasons. We need to capture the particulate matter, keep things from going into the Chesapeake Bay, but we also need to control any runoff that's perhaps adversely impacting neighbors. And I have several neighbors in my area of Uppingham and Trent that have stormwater or flooding issues on a fairly regular basis. I like the way this committee is focused on objectives as opposed to having just an open slate to investigate whatever the committee wants to. There are some objectives with this committee, and we might find in the course of doing this work that there will be some follow-on or extra activities, and I think that's great, but we have a nice focus for the start. And I'm also hoping that with that focus, we can proceed expeditiously and get to recommendations before the end of this calendar year.
Thank you. Mr. Barr, it's your turn to comment.
Thank you. Yes, actually, I'd just like to add to Morris's careful dissection of stormwater management and runoff and point out that actually the two issues are connected, Morris. The issue is that particulates have to get from the yard to the stream. And the rate of stormwater runoff, in fact, just determines the number of particulates that arrive in the stream. So rapid stormwater runoff means a whole lot of particulates go into the stream. Slowing the stormwater runoff means far fewer particulates go into the stream. So the target a lot of the time in stormwater management is in fact slowing runoff. That is a major solution to stormwater management. In terms of what to see in the committee, yes, the biggest problem the town is having with stormwater runoff is flooded basements and flooded yards, and we've got to think about ways to do that. Our tree policy also, we've really got to look at that and decide what we want to say in reforestation. It turns out that only about 1 of 3 saplings survives to full mature tree. And so what does reforestation mean under that context? We've got to go over that and come up with some answers. That's all, thanks.
Thank you. All right, so our next question is, as a council member, what will you do to ensure new residents, particularly those undertaking renovation or new construction projects, are made to feel welcome and integrated into our community and our governance processes? And Steve Surko gets to go first on that one.
Great question. I think one of the most important things we can do to make folks feel welcome, especially if they're planning to do any building or construction work, is to have this welcome letter. Because the welcome letter sort of is an introduction to town regulations and town values that are pertinent to what new residents might be considering. I've noticed at council meetings when we've had building permit reviews, not infrequently the homeowners, the new homeowners, our new neighbors are really surprised by what the town expects from new constructions or the concerns that many neighbors have with new constructions. I think that if we just spell this out clearly in advance with this welcome letter, it can really reduce those tensions. And that's not to minimize the importance of some of the other town activities that we have enjoyed, like the town parties at the swimming pool, July 4th events. There are a lot of activities that we can hold throughout the year to welcome residents and sort of build our community. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was, next comes Mr. Barr.
Yes, we need to do better. That's the short answer. There's a flashpoint now in the approval process where frequently residents feel unwelcome as we challenge aspects of their approval. And we're working on that. As Steve said, I think the welcome letter is going to take some of the tension away from that. The website that I'm talking about, expanding it further, will, I think, take more of the tension away from that. I also think that having a formal stormwater review by a landscaper that gives more information to the council is going to also take more of that tension away and therefore make it much easier for the residents to be able to have their plans approved. And so I'm looking at all those ways to try to approve it, and certainly clarifying our code, which is what the committee is about, is part of that too. So there's a lot of work to be done there. We already have, of course, welcome new neighbors parties, which is terrific. And we hopefully have residents who are reaching out to their neighbors and greeting them, and that also is valuable. But I think we do need to improve our process, and I've given some ideas for that.
Thank you. Mr. Panner.
Thank you. So I do think we've got to be a little careful, because I love welcome letters that lay out how people should follow the rules. I think that's helpful, and that's largely there now. We've got to be careful. I've watched meeting after meeting where people run out crying. They've followed all the rules, they've gotten all their permits, they are complying with the law, and then people have stood up and shamed them. And it's at some point where I literally feel like I have to say, I'm sorry to the people who have come before the council. So that's something we've got to culturally just kind of nip in the bud. And I know people have strong feelings, but we've got to find a different way to express them. And then I do want to keep pushing a little bit on this stormwater issue, because the problem is, if we were not able to grant waivers, one of the things that's fascinating about this area is we might not be able to build at all and comply with stormwater management. There's a long history here, but one of the things that I think is important is we do have to be careful about our terms. And that's why I would really focus on making sure people understand the law, and their engineering firms do. And I think that's going to smooth the process. And then we need to be a little more welcoming and a little take the temperature down at some of these meetings. That's what I would do.
Thank you. Everybody got the chance, right? I want to make sure I'm not getting out of stake here. So there is a lot of interest in the issue of stormwater. So here's one more question. Builders now routinely can and do pay the county around $1,000 in lieu of complying with its stormwater runoff regulations for new construction. What is your thinking on this? And if you oppose allowing payments for these waivers, what do you propose the town council could do about this county practice? And it's Mr. Barr's first this time.
Right, yeah. The waivers have started coming in the last 3 or 4 years, and so that's been the concern, that's where the question is coming from. We have the county code on stormwater management in our own code. So we are allowed to certainly ourselves do what I suggested, which is we get a formal qualified landscaper to review the waiver and give that information to the council. And that way we can see whether the county is in fact doing everything possible to manage stormwater, because there are times when it looks like they have not been doing everything possible. One recent case, they were fixing on underground wells, and they are one method, but they had not considered rain gardens, they had not considered permeable pavers. There are other methods to control stormwater runoff too, and a landscaper reviewing it could well have picked that up and mentioned it to the owners long before the meeting when it came up right at the end. And that's what I'm saying. Our process can make this whole thing easier if we can implement it.
Thank you. Mr. Panner.
Okay, so, you know, when I heard this, I was sort of like, wow, since 2014, what has happened? And I went back through. Stormwater management did not apply to residential properties at all in Montgomery County until 2010. I talked to the engineers at the county, and they said we spent a couple of years trying to figure out how to apply what are municipal and industrial rules to a residential area. And we modified it. So by 2002 or 2013, 2014, we had to change the rules, because one of the problems is that sometimes you can't do effective stormwater management if the soil has too high a concentration of clay. In fact, the engineer said to me that some of the homes that were originally built here, anything before 2010, couldn't have been built at all. Now, I'm not claiming that I understand all the nuances of this, but I also know the state has a whole separate regulatory regime for managing water runoff, which is what goes into the basements and everything else. So I think we should consult with neighbors, but at the end of the day, one of the things that's difficult about this is it's a pretty technical question that I'm happy we're having the ad hoc committee on, but we could really set ourselves back if we don't understand the technical piece of it that we're endeavoring to do. So I'm welcoming that and excited that we will.
Thank you. And Mr. Surko.
Right. I'd like to go back to the scenario that you described at the beginning of the question, Nancy. And that was basically every permit that's come to Somerset since 2014 has had a waiver. Some waivers have, I believe, gotten up to about 71% of the stormwater, and the new owners, the building contractors, just simply pay a fee to the county, which is great for the county's overall program of improving stormwater, but it doesn't help Somerset. And I think where I come down on this complex issue is much more with Robin, that there are a number of things that can be done. You have the wells, you have rain gardens, and I believe that the waivers should be the last resort, not the first resort. So I would rather have a situation where homeowners try to do whatever mediation they can on their property. If it falls short, that's fair enough. Then they can request a waiver from the council, and I would be happy to approve those waivers because they've made a number of good faith efforts, made real progress to minimize the amount of runoff and stormwater. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to change the order. All right, we're going to go on to a new question. What are your views on banning gas-powered leaf blowers used by landscape companies? And if elected, would you support such legislation? And Mr. Panner goes first this time.
Yeah. So I think we have two steps here. The first is an easy one, which is we've already enacted replacing gas-powered leaf blowers in the town. We control it, and as they deprecate the equipment, we'll replace it with electric equipment. What I think is a little bit trickier is how we do sort of the same thing with the small businesses we want to help. I think in a sort of ideal world, I'd love the quiet and nice of electric leaf blowers. It would be great. But one of the things that I'm sensitive about, particularly now that we're in the middle of a very difficult economic time, is how we roll these things out so it's fair to the people that we kind of want to support. We have a team of people who we have worked with for a long time. We believe in them. I don't think they're, doing amazing, but they are making a good living and they're raising their families. And I want to make sure that we do things as a town that are not perceived as not sensitive, particularly now that we need to be able to accommodate people who are probably going to be struggling more than they ever have been. So I'm in favor of it. I love the idea, but let's make sure we're careful so we don't hurt the people that we work with and care about.
Mr. Surko.
I'm certainly looking forward to the day when we get rid of our own gas-powered leaf blower in the town. It's been a bit of a slog to get to the point where we've agreed and we put some money in the budget to replace it in the future. The idea there is for the town to demonstrate that it is possible to do leaf blowing on a large scale with battery-powered leaf blowers. The benefits are just what Morris talked about. It's the noise pollution. It should, and it's, you know, I appreciate Morris talking about concern for the contractors. At least when I watch the contractors with the gasoline-powered leaf blowers, I rarely ever see any hearing protection. So I don't think it serves the actual individuals doing the work any benefit to use those. So I like us to move as expeditiously as possible to having battery-powered leaf blowers, but I think it needs to be done in a common sense approach like the District of Columbia has done. It's not a radical idea to do this type of a shift. We could follow the same legislative path that would, over a period of years, phase out the use of gasoline-powered leaf blowers so there's no whipsaw effect onto the small business owners.
Thank you. And Mr. Barr, it's your turn.
Right, yes, we've considered this issue a lot on the Environment Committee, and we've opted for a middle course. And to explain that, DC, yes, has banned gas-powered leaf blowers from 2022, and Chevy Chase Village locally has also banned gas-powered leaf blowers. We considered making that suggestion to the town and rejected it at this time, and instead went for a different approach, which is to try to build up a consensus in favor of quieter machines. So working with the town of Chevy Chase and Chevy Chase Village, we've actually developed a list of current contractors who are either just using battery-powered equipment or will agree to use battery-powered equipment if the owner requests it. And that list is now posted on the town of Chevy Chase site. I've written this up in an article for the June Journal, so you don't need to take notes, okay? And so it means that residents now can choose any of those people, and they can see for themselves whether battery-powered mowers are sufficient, and if they are, spread the word so that we can begin to spread the idea that that's all we need to blow the leaves and cut the grass in our town. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, then we're going to go on to something a little bit different. This question is, what is your proudest achievement that you either spearheaded or contributed to on behalf of the town of Somerset? And Mr. Surko gets to go first this time.
Proudest achievement on behalf of Somerset. Sorry, I'm just thinking about different activities. I think it's serving on the Environment Committee and serving on the Town Council. I like to think that I represent folks well. Most importantly, I have a philosophy of listening to everyone and trying to engage with everyone. So for example, on some of these topics recently, there have been some occasionally heated discussions or email traffic on the informal town listserv. And I made a point of reaching out to everyone who wrote on the topics related to like some agenda items I've been working on, whether they're for it or against it. I wanted to let them know that I had heard what they had to say. Maybe I had some follow-up questions to get some more insights. So I'm very proud of the way I represent the community.
Thank you. And now Mr. Barr.
Could you repeat the question for me?
Repeat the question, sure. It says, what is the proudest achievement that you spearheaded or contributed to on behalf of Somerset?
Garbage. And compost. And what that comes down to is that with Patty Friedman, I led the effort to start a municipal composting service in the town. And now almost 50% of the town is participating in that municipal composting service. That has taken many tons of our garbage, and particularly the stuff that turns into methane out of the landfill into material that we can actually reuse in our yards. And that is, I think, a major achievement. And I hope that another 50% of the town does sign up for composting in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. And it's your turn, Mr. Panner.
Well, with Mother's Day having just been in our sights, I have to say this is one I have contributed to. But I think what has been most meaningful to me has been to be a husband and a parent in a community that values those things and makes a point of having people be role models. It's extended to how we've treated our neighbors. It's extended to how we treat everyone around us. And I think the values of caring for others, which are values that I think we all share, are best lived by demonstration. And what's been wonderful about this town for me has been able to be part of all the activities that my children have been part of, the school and the swimming and the running races and everything that they've done around that, and the opportunities for service, the opportunities for creating an environment that people are so happy to be part of. So although I am definitely a contributor with my wife being the leading protagonist here, it is my proudest set of achievements.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to go on to something else, and it's on a different topic. How high of a priority is it for you to convert town streetlights to LED? And Mr. Barr gets to answer first.
It is, for me, a high priority, and it's something that we've been working on for more than 10 years now. The reason why we need to convert is, first of all, they are the coming technology, but LED lights are very much more efficient than high pressure sodium or mercury vapor lights, which are the town lights at the moment. They are very much lower maintenance than the high pressure sodium or mercury vapor lights than the ones now. We've got LED lights in town at the moment, 6 of them on Dorset. They're 10 years old and they've never had any maintenance issues at all, and they're still going strong. So what that translates into is that LED lights will be much cheaper for us. We will save a lot of money with the LED lights. Finally, also, if we want, LED lights give us options that we just don't have with high pressure sodium and mercury vapor, so that we can have holiday displays of LED lights. We can turn down the LED lights at night. They are simply a more advanced technology than the things that we have now, and it's time we moved. Pepco is very slow on that. Dominion Energy, our neighbor, is way ahead of Pepco on LED lights.
Thank you. Mr. Panner.
I love LED lights, and I think they're fantastic. The only thing I've asked for in this whole process is how much is it going to cost the town? Because what's tricky about this is right now, Pepco maintains our lights. And if we are going to take this on, we just have to understand what the budgetary impact is to us. So when we had the samples out, they ranged from a couple of dollars a light to $2,500 a light. Questions of who would maintain. At one point, Pepco came in and said, that's on you guys. We're not going to do that for you. Now, what I like is we as a town, and Marnie Shaw has been the president of the council, has been pushing Pepco very hard on the idea that we have to understand how our obligations as a community has changed. Nobody differs on LED lights. We love them. They're beautiful. Everything that Robin says about what fun you can have with them is all true. The only question is we have to make sure that we're doing this in a way that is consistent with our ability to fund it and support it. And as soon as we have that clarified, and Pepco, by the way, may be very close to following Dominion and doing that, we're going to be all set, and I think everyone will be very happy.
And now it's Mr. Surko's turn.
Great. I'm very much in favor of LED streetlights. I think they are and should be a priority for the town of Somerset for all the reasons that Robin Barr spelled out. I think Morris's reservations are well-founded. Pepco has been a very difficult partner to work with on this, and they are in the driver's seat to a certain extent. We can't go to Dominion to get them to do it. We have to work with Pepco. But I think it's just a matter of time, and hopefully we're talking about a short period of time before we can get some answers to important questions and move ahead. What we're really looking at, I think more stating that, is return on investment from the financial standpoint. How many years would it take us to get paid back by the savings from our investment? And personally, I would argue it could be quite a few years because the environmental benefits are really important for Somerset and for the world. But we do need to have some return on that investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, 2 more questions for this portion of the evening. Are there any initiatives or ideas that you have that might help foster the sense of community in Somerset, both during this pandemic and once it is over? And Mr. Panner goes first this time.
I love this question because I think it goes to the heart of what is going to make this community enduring. It has been something that has distinguished it from the get-go. I don't know many communities our size that in a very disciplined way have a newcomers party. I don't know very many communities our size that work hard to provide parties for residents of all ages. And so all of those initiatives, I think, are fantastic and are living and are wonderful. Where I would focus vis-a-vis the council is how we develop a culture of seeing ourselves in the other. So some of us who have been fortunate to be here for a long time see new families coming and only sort of see the downside of that, or are threatened by it or worried about it. And what I would love to have is a more welcoming attitude towards that new energy and new life, because new people are coming to build their dreams here. And I think that is the best testament to our community, and something at the council level. Just when they come to the council, I really would like to foster, on top of all the other wonderful activities that we put our time, energy, and budget into.
Thank you. Mr. Surko's turn.
Well, I still remember when my wife and I and our family moved to Somerset. We were welcomed with open arms. It was almost unexpected how warm the welcome was. And my sense is that by and large, that value or character of Somerset has continued over the years, even as people move out and people move in. And I think that is absolutely wonderful. And I think some of the special activities that Robin and Morris, folks have talked about contribute to that. I think that one initiative that might help, especially as we're talking about perhaps newer, younger couples moving in, is to improve our website, make it more user-friendly, make documents more accessible. But unfortunately, because of the current fiscal situation, as we look ahead to income reductions, we've had to remove or redact any improvements to our website from the budget. But I think that would be another priority to consider moving forward. It was a small amount of money, $5,000 or $10,000, I think. Thank you.
And Mr. Barr.
Yep. First of all, a lot of what I've been saying tonight is about improving the community spirit in the town. But one of the things that was clear, as I said in my introductory statement, is that the pandemic has very much brought out the community spirit in the town. And it is also with new residents as well as long-term residents. I noticed on Daniel Fitzgerald's mask team that there are residents in town who've been here only a few months as well as residents in town who've been here about 30 years on the mask team. And that's wonderful. That's new residents mixing with old residents, and they are driving me crazy because they're chatting back and forth in text messages all the time, and I'm jumping and forth, up and down with all those text messages. But that is wonderful, and that's a great community organizer, and that's great. But also the things I've been saying about creating a much friendlier website, a greetings website, so that when people coming in see they're coming into a town and know that we're a town coming in that is welcoming them, that's important too. So yes, we are a community, it's great, new residents are getting involved. We can do a bit more around the edges, and I've been talking about that. Thanks.
Thank you. And now our last question for this part of the program, and it is, what do you hope to accomplish by serving on the council? Small little question. And it's Mr. Surko's turn to go first.
I think thank you. I think there are a number of efforts that we've talked about, areas of concern. I think a specific initiative that I'm really looking forward to bringing to the council and getting approved is having Somerset opt into the Montgomery County Healthy Lawns Regulation. That's the sort of the common description of it. It's an anti-pesticide regulation. I think it's really important for residents of Somerset to have the same protections against the use of some dangerous pesticides that are not EPA approved, et cetera, that the rest of the county has. And this is a standard thing. Somerset has opted into a number of other county regulations, and several of our neighboring jurisdictions have already opted into the Healthy Lawns initiative. So I'm looking forward to advocating that.
Thank you. And next, Mr. Barr.
On council, I'd certainly wish to continue my improvement of the environment in town from that position that I've already done via my position as chair of the Environment Committee, and that's important. But also, I would like to bring some of my budget expertise to the council itself, because I think it's important to have that budget expertise on council. Things like the concept of investment spending, which is a grand name sometimes for just talking about maintenance. In other words, even in down times, we have to think about things like varnishing the pool house, because if we don't do it, we're going to have carpenter bees attacking again, and that's going to be a much bigger cost down the line. And that's why in maintenance budgets are investment spending. So things that low, that minimal, really do matter in a larger context, where we've got to make very difficult decisions about good investment spending to protect ourselves down the line. And I see that as something important I can bring to council.
Thank you. And Mr. Panner.
So I agree that we should continue to maintain our town and protect the environment. But if I had one aspiration, it would be for when I first told people that we had a council. And they said to me, you know, we don't pay much attention because the town seems well run and an awfully nice place. And so my aspiration for the next couple of years and for as long as we can hold on to our beautiful community is for people to be able to live here and not really have to pay attention. In a world of sort of superheated politics, one of the things that I love is I come home to Somerset, and maybe it's a little bit of a bubble, but it makes me feel safe, and it makes me feel glad, and I can walk and see people. Steve and Robin would be in this category. I would wave and say hello. It's that kind of place. And I hope that for as long as I serve, and I hope I'll get to keep serving, we have that. And that is my highest priority.
Thank you. So that concludes this part of the program. We're going to take a little break, maybe about 5 minutes. I have to go over the many questions that came in and sift through some new ones on topics we haven't necessarily covered, or maybe we need a little bit more information on. So it is 7:59. Just to make it even, let's all plan to be back at 8:05 and we'll continue our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Town of Somerset hosted a Clap Because We Care event in support of healthcare workers fighting COVID-19. Residents went to their porches to clap their hands, bang on drums, ring bells, clang pots and pans, and anything else they could find to create a symphony of sound as a way to show their support for healthcare workers. The brief activity allowed neighbors to connect during the pandemic and offered an opportunity for families to get outside while social distancing.
Okay, so I just unmuted myself and I had a chance to look at the many questions that were submitted by the audience. Thank you so much. I am going to say that a lot of them were about tree canopy, stormwater, which I think we covered to a large extent in the first part of the program, but we'll see if we have time to go back to those. But I'm going to start with a couple of new issues, and let me get my little order here so I know where we're going to go from here. There was one question though related to the proposed committee that would look at tree canopy and stormwater. So I'm going to start with that one, and that is, what should the composition of such a committee be? Do you have any suggestions for how it should be determined? And we'll start with Mr. Barr.
Right. I did have some thoughts on that, as a matter of fact, and Jeffrey gave some guidelines himself on how it should be determined. But the thoughts I had was bringing liaisons in from committees that have overlapping missions to it. And that includes the Environment Committee and PNRC. I'm not sure there are any other committees that do that. But I think those liaisons can bring in perspectives of those different committees to it, which will be informative. They don't need to have a vote, liaisons don't have a vote, but it's important to have the liaisons so that there is that extra information coming to the committee.
Thank you. Mr. Panner.
So I think the most important thing, and I think we're going to do this because it seems contemplated in the mayor's proposal, is to make sure that we have people with relevant expertise. We have people with different interests. So we're going to have realtors on that committee. We're going to have developers on that committee. We're going to have passionate environmentalists on that committee. And we're going to have a diversity of views. And we're going to have a real spirit of open inquiry. And I think that's contemplated, and that's the spirit of the town. So I would expect nothing less. But I think it has to be that kind of committee where people know going in, they probably may or may not agree with each other, but they're certainly going to have different interests and perspectives. And that's how I think we'll get to something that makes everybody in the town feel safe, that all the different perspectives and all the relevant expertise was taken account of. And those are going to be voices that often we haven't heard from because they have not necessarily been engaged in standing committees. But I think for this effort, it'll be exciting and welcome for them to participate.
Thank you. And Mr. Surko, your comments on the committee.
As Morris and Robin explained, the mayor has laid out a vision, which I support, that brings in subject matter experts in a wide range of applicable fields and a large number of community members. So I support that fully. I think that's very exciting. I hope that the individuals who are selected, or the volunteers who will be committing their time to this, recognize that this will not be an insignificant effort. And I should highlight one of the other things that the mayor mentioned is bringing an outside consultant. So that's why we're also talking about a small budget for this particular ad hoc committee. There's a consultant recommended by our town lawyer who has supported neighboring jurisdictions in roughly similar efforts. So I think we have a very productive setup, and I'm excited to see the results. And again, I'm looking for this ad hoc committee to get rolling as soon as possible, probably in the July timeframe, and deliver recommendations before the end of calendar year 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. So here's something on a topic we have not talked about yet, and that has to do with cell towers. We have a couple questions about that. I'll just read the first one that came in. It says, I live on Warwick Place across from Somerset Elementary. On our block, we have very weak cell reception. I realize that many of my neighbors are against this, but those on my block, including many of the faculty and staff at the elementary, would also like adequate cell phone reception. What are your views towards additional cell towers in our neighborhood? And this one is for Mr. Panner first.
So this is a hot topic, and one that the council and the mayor up till now, the questioner is right. I think we've had a fairly unitary policy on it, which is until we feel that the safety of the near-term proximity of the towers has been proven out, we've been very reluctant to support going forward with that. So the council has written on that, the mayor's written on that. I do think what's important is what is getting appropriate cell coverage and doing it in a way that is not environmentally, this is more of a health and safety, so that cell towers are not close enough to anybody. And that's basically been the thrust, I think, of the county. It's not actually something we can regulate, but I think all of the municipalities have asked for something that would be safe for the residents and also effective. And that is now going forward at the council level as well. We've had residents who've been active. We've asked, our attorney has been part of a consortium to try to come up with rules that will accommodate these different interests, because I know it's a hard question, but up till now, until we feel that they're safe, that's the inquiry we've been pushing. I think that's been pretty clear across the council.
All right, Mr. Surko's turn.
Yeah. This is a very challenging issue because, as my colleagues alluded to, we have very little control over the situation. This is a federal issue, and we are preempted from making any claims or disagreements based on environmental hazards or safety or pretty much anything. What we're trying to do, what a small group within the town that's engaged with the county and the state is trying to do, is to ensure that we have in the implementing language the authority to somewhat regulate how these are installed in our town. Right now, or at least the way the initial draft legislation was introduced, you could wake up someday and in your front yard, within that the town's setback, all of a sudden these towers could be constructed. And these towers are not insignificant. I think they're 10, 15 feet tall. They could have box enclosures at the base for electronics. So we would like to have some say in where they're located. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barr.
Right. I think the questioner was asking about probably G4 towers, which are the standard at the moment. And I think the only answer there, and you've probably done it, is contact the carrier and mention your problem and see if the carrier has any solution to your problem. They may have boosting capacity that could help you. What Steve is talking about and what Morris is talking about is the G5 towers, which are making their way into the country now. And these are the towers that are meant to be what will allow self-driving cars to navigate by themselves. They are a considerable advance over G4 towers, but they require placement in communities where self-driving cars would go, which is anywhere there's a road. And there is concern both about their sightliness and also about the signals from them that could be cancer-producing is the argument, although the evidence is gray at most on it. As Steve pointed out, these are federal rules. There's little that we can do. The little that we can do, we are trying to do. And that's all I can say on that.
Thank you. So here's a question, I'm going to reword it a little bit, but it has to do with the fact that, yes, the council makes the decisions for the town on government policy, public policy, but this person wants to know how residents' concerns can be incorporated in those decisions, especially if there's a decision that needs to be made in a short time frame. So I guess the bottom line is, as a council member, how would you go about understanding what the residents' positions are. And this is Mr. Surko first.
Great. As I indicated, I really do like to hear from folks and engage. There are some state laws that we have to abide by, most notably the Open Meetings Act. So we can't have a quorum of council members talking with residents about subjects outside of properly scheduled meetings. But what I would like, if a resident has a particular concern with an agenda item, they should feel free to email me directly. Not a blast on the town or the informal listserv, just email me directly. And if they want their comments to be considered formally by the entire council, they can email them to the town manager, so they'll be included in the records of the town council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barr.
Right, yes. What Steve is talking about is something called ex parte communication, which our town lawyer has reminded us about and prevents some forms of communication to council members when there is a approval process for a new construction happening. We need to be more open in other ways, and we can be more open in other ways. One of the things I've talked about, in fact, in my own document is just to hold evening meetings, perhaps even Zoom meetings with residents, just to listen to your concerns generally and react to them. And we as council members, if I'm elected, have to be sensitive to the possibility of ex parte communication and be careful with that. But nevertheless, we need to be more open, listen to residents, reach out to them as best we can, both Zoom meetings and in-person meetings, and I certainly will try to do that if elected. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Panner.
I think everything that has been said is great, and I would like to kind of emphasize, maybe put an underline on something that Steve Surko said. I think taking some of this off, some of the superheated listserv communication and where people are sort of lobbing grenades at each other in the night, I think maybe some of that kind of taking the temperature down and being a little bit more open and just take it down a notch is not going to be the worst thing in the world. Email and listserv communication is so easy to misconstrue, and I sort of second Robin and Steve's call for just more, face-to-face. Of course, you have to be sensitive about ex parte, but at the end of the day, there's nothing like just talking to someone and having to watch their body language and being able to share ideas in an open way to kind of take the temperature down in the community. But I think all these ideas are great, and I do support as much open dialogue as we can have.
So someone actually did ask a question about a decline in civility, but I think to some extent you guys addressed that. But I guess I will give you a few moments if you want to comment on how you propose restoring civility in town. Let's see, it's Mr. Barr's first.
Bring in Ms. Manners. No, we have been talking about it already. I think the decline in civilities are on particular issues, and that has been about the approval meetings in town council, where some people have been quite aggressive in voice at that point. What it signals to me is not that some people are rude, but rather that there's something wrong with our process. And that's why I've been talking about how to change our process to avoid that kind of thing happening. And that's where the idea for the very welcoming website came out. It's where the idea for having a landscape review. And by the way, that should be an open meeting. So when the landscaper is asking questions after waiver has been held, then other residents can be there to ask questions too. Whole idea is to take stress away from that approval meeting, which will increase civility, I hope, during that, and stop having residents crying outside the meeting, which is dreadful that is happening right now.
Mr. Panner.
It's funny. I don't know what exactly has caused it. It was so sweet this past summer. One of our residents is a sort of renowned journalist who wrote an article about how our local swim team embodied social capital at its best, and parents chipping in and kids and all of the things that we've talked about here tonight in glowing terms. And I sort of sometimes reflect at some of these meetings and I look at the national stage and I wonder, has something seeped in here a little bit that we just need to all kind of be mindful of and kind of check some of the dialogue? And I don't know if it's a process question. What I've watched is people following the process and then coming away shamed and really unpleasant interactions. I've seen my fellow council members accused of having no values. There are statements that sometimes I think it's up to all of us as adults and role models, because it's all the little ones who are watching this, that we need to kind of check some of that dialogue. And I think it's hard to legislate that, but in the same way that that wonderful article about the Somerset Dolphins talked about social capital, that's the other side of social capital, and I hope we will all do our best to contribute and build to it.
Thank you. And Mr. Surko.
Great. I think Robin's absolutely correct that there's a process issue here. By and large, I think this is a very friendly, welcoming, positive community. And in a number of areas, I have seen the community address issues in a thorough, comprehensive way and debate topics without anyone getting upset. You know, questions of, should we change the age that kids can get into the swimming pool? Or should we still have Halloween night on Cumberland? Or should we have sledding on Cumberland? We've gone through those issues without any difficulty. The area where we seem to have difficulties is with new constructions. And I think that's because there are some issues with the process. There are misunderstandings or misconceptions between the new homeowners who feel that they have abided by the county regulations and the town laws as they've seen them written down, and current town residents who are concerned about the very real impact of those new constructions on their homes and on the community. So I think the way ahead is things like a welcome letter and this ad hoc committee to come up with some recommendations on how we can improve the building regulations to clarify expectations.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to ask the last question, and then we'll have your closing statements, and then I have a little wrap up to do. So the last question is, given the new normal, what do you think of televising council meetings in this way, like this is tonight, in order to encourage a wider participation by town residents? And I will say, last looked, we had 96 people online, or 96 computers anyway. So Mr. Panner is first for this one.
I think it's great. Although I think all of us have probably been on more Zoom meetings than we can count and probably ever want to do in our lives. I think it's a great addition. It turns out that it feels like it's not a hard technology to implement, although I shouldn't speak for Matt and for the team in the town management, but it feels great. And I think it is a wonderful way for people to participate and it lower overhead. A lot of us are, putting kids down or working on homework or doing whatever we need to do. So to be able to jump in and jump out, I think is wonderful. There may be some things that still need to be done in person, and we'll talk to our town lawyer, but the idea of making something more accessible, it always feels to me like a nice idea.
Thank you. Mr. Surko.
Yes, I'm impressed by the turnout. My perception at regular council meetings, they run long, and few residents have the endurance or the interest to show up for a long meeting, understandably. And if more than 5 residents show up on any particular topic of interest, I really take note. That's significant to me. And I don't think it's because there aren't that many people who are interested in it. It's just that there aren't that many people who, for a variety of reasons, can make it to the town council meetings at the town hall. So if we could somehow use this technology to increase participation, I think that would be awesome.
Thank you. And Mr. Barr.
Yes, funnily enough, when I was working at NIH, I was at the National Institute on Aging, and I ran our advisory council meeting, and I introduced video casting to the advisory council meeting. It was a great success, actually, and it absolutely increased attendance at the meeting from people who couldn't otherwise go there. It also, by the way, is a complete record of the meeting. So one of the advantages of going to Zoom and recording it is then the council meeting in its entirety is recorded. For the person writing the minutes, that's a huge advantage. You do not have to go through all 3 hours of the meeting. You just zoom into those areas where you are unsure what was said, but it is an asset there. But in terms of getting more people involved, I can tell you it really does work, and it's a very good idea.
Thank you. So now we're going to go to closing statements, which, as I said earlier, will be in the opposite order, more or less, than the opening statements. And these are just 1 minute. So Mr. Surko, since you went last, you go first on your 1 minute closing statement.
Right. Thank you, Nancy, the Board of Supervisors of Elections, my fellow nominees for Town Council, and the Maryland Municipal Cable Group. This town forum has really been democracy in action, and it's been a pleasure to participate. I've enjoyed sharing my vision of Somerset with you. It was heartening to hear how much Robin, Morris, and I have in common on a large number of the issues. These are challenging times, so I'm glad we can come together to discuss them. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my wife, Elizabeth Thompson, for her support of my service as a council member, and thank my campaign manager, Tali Levine, for her engagement on my re-election. If re-elected, I look forward to hearing more from you about your issues and concerns and vision for Somerset. My goal is always to help keep Somerset a welcoming and special place to live. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. And Mr. Panner, still in the middle.
And that is a good intro. I think I am a little bit in the middle, which is in some ways maybe the best place to be. I'm in a bustling family with 4 kids, and I often feel like families first, although I like to think I've developed some diplomatic skills in that process, which will serve me well. I also think, as all the candidates tonight and so many of our residents, we are so focused on our community. The outpouring in all these different areas has been fantastic during this difficult time. And happily, it's not that different than any other time. I think it's a place where people come together. And so my kind of final appeal is maybe a little bit of an echo on the civility question. Let's all just try to be a little kinder. I think this has been a difficult period in our national history and maybe world history. And I think if we can make this place just a place where you extend the hand and smile when in doubt, it's going to go a long way.
Thank you. And Mr. Barr.
Thank you, everybody, for staying with us through this meeting. I appreciate it very much. If you want to hear more from me, I have 2 follow-up Zoom meetings. One of them is on Saturday from 2 to 3:30, and the other one is on May the 27th from 5 to 6:30. And if you've got more questions to ask me or want to hear more from me on any of the issues that have been discussed, then just contact me and I'll send you an invitation to the meeting, and we can continue the discussion. I have said at the beginning why I want to be on council, and I'll simply repeat it now, that I have the experience, the accomplishment, and the time, and the ideas, as you've heard, to serve this council well, and that is why I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in closing, I would like to thank the town's election committee for organizing this forum and for gathering the questions and helping to choose what we asked tonight. I want to remind you to watch for the next issue of the Town Journal, which should be available online during the last week of May and in print before the election, because the Town Journal will feature some written responses to more questions, maybe even some of them that we didn't ask tonight, but also some more that were submitted earlier. But also I want to remind everybody that this year the election is going to be conducted differently than it ever has been in the town of Somerset. It will be conducted entirely by mail. And all town residents who are registered voters in the town of Somerset or Montgomery County with a Somerset address will be mailed a ballot and a postage prepaid envelope on Tuesday, May 19th. If you are unsure about whether or not you are registered, or whether your voter registration is up to date, please contact and I think they might be able to post this web address up there, but it's election@townofsomerset.com. That's election, singular, at townofsomerset.com if you're unsure about whether or not you're registered, or if you think you might not be registered and you want a voter registration form, because it's very important. Otherwise, you won't have a ballot mailed to you. There was a voter registration form in the May 3rd issue of the Town Journal, and you could fill that out and just send it in if you are unsure. Election day is June 9th. So all the ballots must be postmarked by this date and then received by the town election services provider no later than 5 p.m. on June 16th. So get your ballot in early and make sure that your vote counts. Thank you so much to everybody who participated tonight, and I hope you all have a pleasant rest of your evening.